In this lesson, we're moving past relevance into our discussion of witnesses and testimonial evidence. And to start our discussion, we really want to focus on this idea of witness competence under Rules 601 through 606 of the Federal Rules of Evidence. So the good news here is that witness competency is a very straightforward issue on an evidence fact pattern, right? We say that generally a witness must be competent to testify at a trial. Rule 601 tells us that unless a federal statute provides otherwise, everyone is presumed to be competent to testify at trial. Could almost end the lesson right here, right? That's all you need to know. Everyone is presumed competent to testify at trial unless a statute provides otherwise, right? And there could be some issues with state law and diversity actions, but it's really outside the scope of what we need to worry about, right? The rule is very straightforward. One more time, Rule 601. Everyone is presumed to be competent to testify at trial. So why do we make a big deal out of this under the federal rules? And you spend a lot of time discussing this probably in your evidence course. Well, at common law, it wasn't so straightforward, right? We had this idea of mental and moral competency. Mental competency, and this will be important in our next lesson when we're thinking about impeachment. So we can kind of go over now to kind of preview impeachment. But mental competency, it refers to the idea of a witness's ability to observe, recall, and relate facts accurately to the jury. Often here we're thinking about sensory competence issues. A person who has a serious visual impairment who's going to testify to something that he saw at an accident scene, right? Well, that witness might have some serious mental competency issues, right? They have a visual impairment that could affect what they actually saw or didn't see. And at common law, that was usually a decision that the judge had to make, whether this witness was actually qualified to take the stand and testify or not. But today, under Rule 601, we say, hey, you know what? Even if there's some mental competency issues, some sensory defects, we'll let a blind person take the stand and testify, right? So, and moral competency goes to this idea of bias or prejudice, when a witness might have some sort of motive to testify untruthfully, right? They have no mental competence issues, right? They can observe, recall, and relate facts perfectly fine to the jury, but for some other reason, they might have a motive to testify untruthfully. Perhaps a party wants to call his own mother to testify on his behalf, right? Well, that mom might have some prejudice or bias towards her own son, right? Some moral competency issues. Well, again, generally we presume under Rule 601 that every person is competent to testify. So that mom is not going to be precluded from testifying at trial for a competency issue. So how do we deal under the federal rules? What's the pushback to this idea of witnesses that might have mental or moral competency issues? Well, many of you probably know this, right? The idea is mental and moral competency goes to the weight of the evidence, not the admissibility. What the federal rules does under 601 is really take these ideas of mental and moral competency out of the judge's hands as a legal issue and gives it to the jury and says, hey, jury, you can consider mental and moral competency issues when you're on your fact-finding mission to determine what actually happened here. It goes to the weight of the evidence. So if a party calls their own mom to testify, we're not going to preclude them from doing that for moral competency reasons. However, on cross-examination, right, that mom can have her credibility attacked, and the jury can then consider the credibility of that witness when they are rendering a verdict, right? So it's not that mental and moral competency issues just don't matter and Rule 601 throws them away, right? It just goes to the weight of the evidence rather than the admissibility. We would rather the jury have more information than less in terms of witnesses and testimonial evidence when we're thinking about Rule 601. Right? So again, the idea here is everyone is presumed competent to testify at trial, and these ideas of mental and moral competency go to the weight of the evidence for the jury to consider, not the admissibility of the judge to consider, right? And generally, the way that we see mental and moral competency attacked is going to be through impeachment, which will be the subject of our next lesson. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about all the ways that you can attack a witness's credibility, mental and moral competency issues in our next lesson. Okay, so we'll get there, but the main idea is this is going to be issues for the jury to consider when they're deliberating to render a verdict, right? Not admissibility issues. Okay, that's the main takeaway from this lesson, right? That's the main thing we want to understand, and we're going to get into way more detail in our next lesson. We talk about impeachment, but we can go over some other stuff, right? Just to cover all of our bases, right? Make sure that we're going over all of our competency issues. Right, so, and you in law school probably read this case, Bynum or Bynum v. State, and we're thinking about a witness's ability to communicate. What if a witness is somehow inhibited in their ability to communicate or articulate facts to the jury? In this case, Bynum v. State, we have a 25-year-old or an adult who has cerebral palsy and has their ability to communicate very much diminished. They're limited mostly to gestures and nods, yes, no questions. They had aid from a computer device that could help them with communication, but really had significant limitations due to the cerebral palsy and their ability to communicate. And of course, there's an objection there for witness competency, and the court finds in Bynum v. State that even if you have cerebral palsy or some other condition that might affect your ability to communicate, so long as you're not precluded from cross-examination, from being subjected to cross-examination, we're going to let you take the stand, right? We're going to say that you have competency to testify because everyone is presumed under Rule 601 to be competent to testify, right? Even if you have some sort of diminished capacity in your ability to communicate, no problem, can still take the stand as long as you can be subject to cross-examination. This is a very famous case in Bynum v. State. Next, we have this idea of child competency, right? Again, Rule 601 and other federal statutory law tells us that children are presumed to be competent to testify, right? Now, some jurisdictions may be split on this that aren't following the federal rules, but for our purposes, under the federal rules and other federal statutory law, children are presumed to be competent to testify at trial. Right, and you might even have some special accommodations made for children. You'll read some case law on this, and we can put more below this video if you want to read the specifics about special accommodations for children. Oftentimes though, right, if we say that there could be some, generally we're thinking about, child abuse cases where bringing the child to court and making them testify in front of the alleged attacker or the alleged abuser could cause some sort of harm to the child, some sort of emotional distress to this child or other harm, right? We might provide some accommodations for the child, right? You often see a closed circuit television where the child's allowed to be in another room and is on closed circuit TV giving their testimony. Or you could have a videotaped deposition that's brought into court, although this could raise some hearsay issues and maybe confrontation clause issues, which we'll talk about way later. Don't worry about that now. But right, special accommodations can be made for children who could suffer some type of emotional distress or harm having to come to court and face their attacker or abuser, right? Now, the key to recognize here, and the one thing I would note on child competency and this idea of special accommodations, is generally we're not going to allow a child to have special accommodations if they're just nervous about talking in front of people, right? If they just come to court and there's no risk of emotional harm or other type of harm, right? They're just kind of nervous and to talk in front of people. Generally, we're not going to provide special accommodations there. We're really thinking, when we're thinking about videotape depositions coming in, or closed circuit television cameras, or even just allowing the child's mother to sit with them on the stand. For any of these types of special accommodations, there really does usually need to be a risk of actual emotional harm, not just a nervousness to testify in front of a large group of people. And that's child competency under 601. So thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP, for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first-year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.